I'd like to start just with a question about the movie itself. Actually, I'm going to ask all the questions, and then I'd just like our specialists here to give their feedback. I'm not going to tell you it's going to take a lot of time because these guys have a lot in their background, in their bio, as you probably saw. So you can go ahead and check that out if you want to learn even more about the panelists, if you haven't already done that. Otherwise, I'd just like to know your thoughts about the movie itself, and also about the topic of this conversation, this panel. Is Hong Kong dead? And should we do any? Should anyone even care? Also, if we should do something, then what can we do as a government, as an individual? And is there any future to Hong Kong? Now, you don't have to answer all of these questions, just whatever you feel. Let's just let this flow as it goes. Thank you, and I'll just give this microphone. You don't have to start.
I don't have to start, but I have a microphone, so I can start. But what was the question? What was my feeling about the documentary? Well, for me, it was somehow retrospective of the things that I was doing, because I'm a journalist. I'm a reporter. I'm not writing about China as a China. I'm rather writing about technologies and digitalization, which are of course very connected with China, and also about China influences in technology field, but not only in technological field. So when I was watching this movie, I was having some kind of retrospective about things that I was writing about, or issues that I was interested about in the last few years. And it was like 2019, and I was doing some interview with Joshua Wang. He wasn't mentioned in the interview, but he was really, and he is still a very important person in Hong Kong political scene, very young. Well, he's 26 right now, I think, so still very young guy connected with opposition, and he was one of the faces of this. I think from 2014, from one of the 20 yes, umbrella movement. It was 2014, yes, umbrella movement. But he was also one of the faces of 2019 movement, and he's also right now imprisoned. And then the next memory was from August 10th. Of 2020, when Jimmy was imprisoned, and it was my birthday, and I wake up and I was like, oh, what a nice day, what a nice weather, what a nice week is going to be. And then I just did a quick look up on Twitter, and it was like, okay, no, it's not going to be so nice. Not only because of the information, but because I also has such a feeling there is going to be so much things to do, and it really started like that. And about a week or 10 days after this day, I decided to because I was in a discussion between me and one of the Polish publishers about the book of China influences, and about 10 days or a week after Jimmy was arrested, I decided to just go on with this book. So for me, it was a little bit like retrospective on these issues.
Thanks, Sylvia. So for me, I would say that, again, first of all, I'm not a Hong Kong specialist. We have great Hong Kong specialists here in the room. And also we have Hong Kongers also in the room. So I wouldn't feel comfortable talking from a position of authority, let's say, about how we should feel about the whole situation. But as a person who is professionally involved in researching China's soft power and in general influence and the way perceptions are being shaped, I would say that for me, this movie was in a way universal, because I think that in Poland we have a tendency to look at China in a very kind of, on the one hand, orientalized way. So we treat China as this very faraway entity which has no actual influence here on the ground in Europe or in Poland. So it's very easy for us to project our fears or expectations, beliefs on China, while we're not really looking at it as a authoritarian regime governed by the one-party state, which actually has a lot of on-the-ground impact in many places in the world. And Hong Kong is a great example of how people who share a similar culture to a certain degree can over time create a very distinct identity. And then because of very specific socio-political historic conditions, they have to somehow, they are forced to renounce this identity and the rights which are somehow interconnected with this identity. And from Poland, from our perspective, I think that this is quite important in the context of what is going on in Ukraine now, and the way we treat authoritarian powers. For us, Russia is like the main, this entity that we perceive as the existential threat. And in Hong Kong, it is China. So I feel that this movie is a great example of very similar dynamics. So people who have a certain distinct identity, a willingness to nurture certain values that are at odds with values advocated by many authoritarian states, but at the same time have the means and the willingness to fight this kind of power. And of course, it's very difficult, and I'm rather gloomy in terms of assessing the way ahead. But again, I feel that it's very important to give the floor to this kind of voices and to raise awareness about this kind of stories as the one we've just seen.
I think this one is working. So first of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank you all the organizers for that. Not only for that invitation, but first of all for that idea to screen the movies about Hong Kong, about Hong Kong-China relations, and all the issues that are ongoing in the region. So thank you for that. Thank you, Marcin, also for everything what you've done. After the promotion of the movie, I was observing your struggle with some people on the Facebook. So thank you also for that. You already could hear that. I'm here, I understand, as one of the few, probably Polish scholars who study a bit the Hong Kong politics and Hong Kong political system. So that's true. I spent some time in Hong Kong. I was there many times, and I was trying to research Hong Kong politics from the perspective of European scholar. So for me, that movie, that film was a bit about the short history of modern Hong Kong, of contemporary Hong Kong. I'm not sure if all the people who are not familiar with the Hong Kong modern history could catch up all the important issues here, but there was a lot of important activities, important cases, situation that happened last decades, and this movie is showing a bit something what in Hong Kong it's called a mainlandization of Hong Kong. So how the China was and is influencing the Hong Kong through the perspective, of course, the Jimmy Lai. For me, Jimmy Lai is a quite interesting person, because when I was studying the Hong Kong, he was maybe even only one millionaire business tycoon who chose to stay in that pro-democratic movement, who stick to the pro-democracy side, because you need to know that Hong Kong is very diverse. We have the pro-government, pro-Beijing parties, pro-Beijing intellectuals, pro-Beijing organization, and those pro-democratic ones. So from the political scientist perspective, it's not something unfamiliar that very often business tycoons are choosing the power, the government. And this is the case also of the Hong Kong, that most of the business tycoons are tied to the Beijing. And Jimmy Lai is only one, maybe even one, who represent this pro-democratic movement. So of course you could show the history of this Hong Kong struggle with mainland China through the perspective of Jimmy Lai. biography, but of course there is a lot of what also as Sylvia mentioned, a lot of other leaders of this pro-democratic movement, like Joshua Wong, but not only him. For me, that of course, you know, I would like to promote the Hong Kong as much as possible. So I would add a lot of issue, but I'm not a filmmaker, so probably it would be a very boring movie if I would add a lot of information and data about the Hong Kong, because you could only hear a bit about the umbrella revolution, umbrella movement. Later on, 2019 protests, very fierceful protests and clashes with the police, with the authorities. Because this is the crucial moment for that for Hong Kong. Here you could saw this like 27 years to the end of autonomy, 25 years to the end of the autonomy. I believe that we already had the loss of this autonomy. So after a national security law, there is no autonomy of Hong Kong. When I was asking my colleagues, scholars, many years ago, what will be the future of the Hong Kong after 2047, when there will be end of this one country, two system rule, they were asking me, oh, no one knows. You could even hear here that there was an idea that maybe the tail will wag the dog, so that maybe there will be not mainlandization of Hong Kong, but the Hong Kongization of mainland China. But yes, we have authoritarian regime, and you could see what happens. Martin asked, should we care? This is quite obvious answer to that question. Should we care about the human rights? Should we care about the democracy? Should we care about the freedoms? I believe yes. So in that case, I agree with, let's say, Joe Biden, who talked in March this year here in Warsaw, that we have new, let's say, division, new kind of Berlin Wall, yes, that is dividing the world into the autocracies, authoritarian regimes, and democratic ones. So. Here we can see a kind of struggle for democracy. So yes, we should care about that. This is not nowadays not only the issue of Hong Kong. Alicia mentioned Ukraine. I would add Taiwan, which is very tied to the issues which we raise in that movie. So this is kind of important film, and I'm really thankful that you organized that event. Thank you, Marcin.
So of course there was many people working behind the scenes. It was not only me doing these things, and it was our secret guest was actually the person who initiated this, and he's our Polish Hong Konger who's not in Poland anymore. But many of the things you see that are going on in Poland connected with Hong Kong, the movies and different protests sometimes are usually initiated by our guest. And of course, we have other people here today who are also promoting the movie and the whole event today. We were looking for a nice tagline for the movie with that would kind of try to get people interested, and we stopped at, is Hong Kong dead, and should we even care? There was also a version that was, is Hong Kong dead, and do we even care? And my Hong Konger friend said, well, no, we don't care, but we should. So, of course, it's not that no one cares. We care. The people who are here, probably, we all care. But I'm wondering if there's actually anything that we can do besides going to a movie, having a discussion, and that's what I would also like to ask you, if you have anything in mind. What is it even possible? What the government can do, or what we could do?
What government could do? Polish government. Polish government doesn't have any strategy right now, according to China as a China. So I don't think that Polish government has a strategy according to Hong Kong. So I wouldn't right now focus on Polish government in this issue, because, well, it's not like that Hong Kong isn't important. It's very important, but we also have to understand that in this moment that we are right now, it's understandable that for Polish government and for Polish society and for our part of the world, the Ukraine is the main issue, and it's obvious. But also, exactly as Alicia mentioned, when we are thinking right now in this part of the world about Ukraine, and it's a crucial issue for us, so we could also ask, well, in Taiwan, in Japan, in any other parts of the world, why they should care about Ukraine. That's the same question that we are asking, why you should care about Hong Kong. Well, of course, the situation isn't totally similar, because it's not totally similar, but the broader point of view about the situation between Hong Kong and Ukraine, there are so many similarities that it's rather issue for societies, it's rather issue for medias and for journalists, it's rather issue for NGOs or the experts to build up the understanding of what we are dealing with. So when you're asking about government, Polish government, it's like, of course, it would be wonderful. It would be well, probably a great situation when our government would also have some really, I may say, open strategy according to such a situation, but it doesn't have. And in this year, it's easier for me to understand that they aren't focused on this situation. Maybe a year ago, I would be much more strict. I would be much more hard to criticize them on this. Right now, I understand that, of course, we have the situation that we have, and it's obvious that they are focusing on our own issues and our own situation in Europe. But it doesn't mean that we as a media, we as a journalist, because I'm trying to give you my point of view and the point of view of medias, it doesn't mean that we don't have an obligation to also write about this issue, that we don't have an obligation to try to somehow put some interest in people, not only about the closest problems that are among us. So for me it's obvious that, well, what we can do, we can just build up interest in society.
I would reiterate again that, as you said, consciousness and this kind of events are very important. Then secondly, I think that it's also very crucial to be able to facilitate migration for those in Hong Kong who feel that they need to leave Hong Kong and move to another safe place. And as far as I know, but I might be wrong, the UK is the only European country, not EU, but European country, which has this kind of procedures in place so far. And I guess this is something that would be, I could imagine this kind of, I'm not sure whether in Poland, but in general within the EU, this kind of ideas probably could be implemented. But circling back to what Sylvia said about the similar dynamics in answering the question whether we should care about Hong Kong or Ukraine, I feel that at the macro level, it all boils down to the question of whether we have an appropriate strategy to develop any kind of relations with authoritarian states, be it Russia or China. So in the EU, there has been an ongoing debate for many, many years whether we should keep on engaging with the PRC in the same manner that we've been doing it for the last 20 or 30 years. That is, economic cooperation without any actual strings attached, with an assumption that because of economic development, investment, trade, and so on, we would expect China to somehow open up politically and gradually liberalize. And in retrospect, we all know that this hasn't been the case, and this hasn't materialized, and we cannot expect an authoritarian state to change in this way. It's just naive. But on the other hand, we haven't been able to create a coherent facts-based strategy towards China, neither at the level of specific EU member states, not to mention the level of the whole European Union. But this is something that would require us to firstly be able to define what our goals are. So I don't think that we are able to influence Beijing at this point. So we have a strong, powerful leader, Xi Jinping, who has just been chosen for his third term as the supreme leader of the country. And I don't think there is any way we can, influence China to change its behavior. What we can do is to focus on our strengths and weaknesses, to be able to somehow build our resilience in the face of growing threats from different authoritarian states. And again, this is not very optimistic, and it's very difficult. And as we can see, for example, we have a great case of Germany, a country which has been the leader of fostering this kind of pragmatic relations with China, with Angela Merkel believing that trade and cooperation in key sectors will bring the stability in terms of Beijing-Berlin relations. And now we have ended up, after so many decades, with German automotive sector being somehow dependent on the Chinese market. And this is a form of leverage that Beijing can use if political tensions arise. And in the case that, for example, one day the EU would sit down at one table and be able to work towards a more, let's say, rational approach towards China, this could again be used as leverage to prevent this kind of strategy to materialize. So I feel that we have a lot of issues at the level of different member states, but also there are voices, growing voices, also in Germany. Germany is working on its new strategy towards China, which potentially should be more assertive, but whether they will be able to actually implement it, that's another story.
Hopefully not doing the same mistakes with China they've done with Russia. You ask what can we do, what should we do? I will stick to the frames proposed by Alicia, that we have, let's say, at least two tiers. The grassroots level, so the meetings like this one, this is what we can do. You can ask your colleagues, your friends to attend such movement, to support and to be more aware of the situation of not only in Hong Kong but in the region. You can buy Sylvia books about. Yes, but this is about China influence, and we cannot speak about Hong Kong without China. Yes, in that sense that everything starts there. You can read. If I mentioned Sylvia, I will mention also Alicia. You can read her analysis on situation, and you can disseminate them. Very good analysis on China politics. This is the grassroots level. We should try to make people more aware about the situation, because this is not only about the Hong Kong. I'm sorry, I don't want to be a kind of cynical here, but this is not only about the Hong Kong now. It's about the role of the China, about the European attitude toward China, toward other authoritarian countries, not to make the mistakes like we made with Russia. We already had very good speech by the European kind of Minister of Foreign Affairs that European kind of economic growth last decades was built on the low-paid or even not only low-paid labor, but even the people who work in a kind of new form of prisons in China. So we've built our economic growth thanks to these very cheap products from from China. So we need to have the new kind of strategy. So at the grassroots level, we need to be more aware of the situation, and this is such events and dissemination of the information about that is very crucial to understand and to build a kind of support for the politics. Because your question is not only about what we can do with what kind of instrument we have, because this is a very general question, what kind of instrument as the citizens we have to influence the politics of every government. So we can speak about that in a very general sense. When it comes to this, not the grassroots level, but let's say macro level of the governments, again, I don't want to be kind of cynical, but this is somehow quite obvious that for, let's say, the politicians from Poland, the Hong Kong is very far away. We do not have any huge, let's say, economic relations. So this is not the top region that we are interested in. Like Sylvia said, that it's very far away, and Sylvia also said that yes, what the people, let's say, in Japan knows about the Ukraine, and we can ask like Sylvia why they should care about the Ukraine. So we need to build a kind of in my opinion, understanding that this is not only about a particular region, but I purposely mentioned this, let's say, Joe Biden, but this is not only his point of view, that we have a new kind of struggle between the autocrats and democracy. So we should build a kind of support for democracy, for democratic movement, for democratic governments, and this is what we should care. So we can influence, of course, our politicians to be more aware on the China in that sense, because Hong Kong probably is not, it cannot be kind of, you know, focal point for Polish strategy toward Asia, but China, yes, China can be, because this is important economic partner. Also, our position as Poland toward the China is maybe more complicated than some other Central European countries, because also our economic relations are much bigger than other Central European countries. So we can build this knowledge and awareness of the situation, and then influence also the politicians to build a kind of new strategy. And it's changing. We see, for instance, we have this Pew Research studies that attitude toward China is changing among Europeans quite fast. So we see that there is a kind of new opening for the relations. So I will end with this, what I started, that we cannot make the same mistakes like we've made with Russia, to be too much dependent, let's say. We need to be aware of that, sometimes there is no business as usual.
Thank you very much. I'm still very hopeful, especially I'm super happy that we as Poland has people like you, because you probably already know that by just being here, they can't probably ever go to China again. At least the China that is currently with Xi Jinping as power. And for me, it's helpful. I've been doing this type of work for at least 20 years now, and sometimes I've been talking to different people, politicians, and trying to convince them by saying, you know, just use your imagination. If this happens, then this might happen. But now I'm happy because I have a book that I can just give. It's not just me saying something. I have a report. I have some reports that I can use to back not only my feelings, but actually the facts. And also, it's tragic what is happening in Ukraine right now, and the little positive things I see is sometimes the people I used to talk to way back years ago, talking about Chinese products. I mean, I buy Chinese products. I try not to, but of course I'd have to spend my whole life looking for products that are not Chinese, and I wouldn't be here today because I would be looking for products. So I try as much as possible, but I don't. I'm not orthodox. But sometimes when I used to talk with people, they would say that they're not going to do that, or too much time, or everything is Chinese. It's not. It's getting better. And also, I've noticed that after what happened in Ukraine, people actually stopped. They started telling me that, oh, we're not buying Chinese stuff. They started boycotting Chinese products themselves on their own because of the fact that China is helping Russia. So thank you. I'll open up the panel for questions. If anyone has a question, I'll just pass the microphone.
So thank you, our honorable guests, for coming to the event today, and our audience all the way to this evening and missing the football match, unfortunately. But I heard that Poland has won 2-0, so congratulations to Poland. And so, so basically, the topic today is about mainly Hong Kong and also the story of Gemini. But as our guest mentioned before, and also you guys specialists in the Asia politics, and we all know the fact that Hong Kong is closely tied to China in all aspects. And in fact, Hong Kong right now is actually part of China. Like the governments, they are all Chinese puppets, and the economy, like almost 100% relying on China. So it's not a deniable fact that without a change in China, Hong Kong there will be a change. So my question will be going to be on the China issues. So recently there are some protests and I would say kind of uprising going on in China because of the COVID lockdowns. And there are also some overseas Chinese citizens started to realize the fact that they have been lied about everything in China, and they started to have some overseas so-called poster movement. I think they are kind of learning from the Hong Kong protests in the past. So they want to gain awareness to make people in China aware of the issue in China. So my question is, do you guys think that there could be a change in China in maybe in that case that people in China, they may wake up and come out to overthrow the regime in China? Do you see that possibility with the change in globalization and also the change in mind in the Chinese citizen?
So I will start this time to give my great colleagues more time because I was the last one. So now I will start to give them more time to think about that question. I'm not an expert on China because I'm always trying to emphasize and underline that I cannot be an expert on China. I cannot be an expert on such huge, let's say, political system. So that's why I was always focusing on Hong Kong, now more on Taiwan. So I will start with a kind of, as a scholar, from the theory of social movements. There is one of the theories, modernization theory, that when you have a certain economic level, the middle class is already so strong that it's starting to asking the question not only about those primary needs, let's say, but also about some post-materialistic values. Yes, so for many decades it was a theory that framed the discussion about social movement. But in the same time in Asia, we could notice that kind of tension, pro-democratic movements were later, that they break out, that they start later than, let's say, in some other regions of the world. So very often there was a discussion about if there is a factor of let's say, some kind of Confucian values that the people follow the government, the authorities, let's say, for longer than in other parts of the world. We know that already in China we have like at least, let's say, 400 millions of the people who can we see as a kind of middle class, yes? So the people who don't need to be, let's say, afraid about the future, economic future, so they can start some other question about the post-materialistic, let's say, values. But in the same time, the economic progress in China is very much tied to the role of the CCP, of the Communist Party. So maybe we cannot use that frame to analyze, to understand China. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be so sure that we can see a kind of beginning of some broader movement in China, because we need to bear in mind, we need to be aware that every year in China we have a lot of hundreds of thousands of some protests. Is it kind of, the moment that can start some bigger movement? I wouldn't be so sure, but maybe Alice, as an expert on China, will tell more about that.
Thanks. Well, there's always this danger in interpreting protests in China, because we have a tendency to see any kind of mass gatherings in the PSC as a proof of our kind of assumption that this is a certain form of call for democratization. But if you look at what has been happening in China within the last 3 years, since the beginning of the pandemic, I feel that what we've seen in the last couple of days is more, I would assume, it's more about the pandemic and the zero COVID policy than about some grassroots calls for any kind of regime change whatsoever. So maybe some people in the room are not familiar with the developments on the ground. So in the last couple of days in China, we've seen mass demonstrations in different regions and in different cities. Shanghai was under a very strict lockdown in the beginning of this year. And then this kind of very abrupt, prolonged lockdowns were happening here and there in many different cities. For example, in Xinjiang, the region which is known for its ethnic minority, the Uyghurs, who have been they've made the headlines for being detained in the so-called re-education camps. In the capital of Xinjiang, Urumqi, there was a fire in an apartment building, and basically, due to this fire, many people died because, it hasn't been fully documented yet, but people assume that it was because the block was completely sealed off for COVID reasons. So people, the fire brigade couldn't approach the building, but also people were not allowed to run away because of the lockdown. And this was a spark which also has an ethnic dimension to it because of what I've just mentioned about the Uyghurs. So the majority of people who died in this fire were from the ethnic minority, the Uyghur minority. So this is one thing. But then also we've seen many recordings of people marching on the streets of Urumqi, and also Han people, the majority Han ethnic group. They're also on the streets. So I think that there is a mixture of feelings kind of boiling up within the society, and it's very multidimensional. There's an economic dimension to it as well. Business cannot operate freely. People are having troubles making their ends meet. And also, the psychological effect of COVID cannot be denied. People are not really able to plan ahead. So there's a lot of very troubling developments. And I would say that what we're seeing now is a side effect of all these developments. But I'm not sure whether this is about calls for democratization, I'm afraid, at this point.
So maybe on this question I can focus on one issue that may be important and may be helpful with changing the Chinese society and democratization of Chinese society, maybe, but it's it's not so obvious and it's not so easy. Just like 400 million, just as you mentioned, Chinese citizens are more or less seen as middle class, or at least this they have this level of life that they may think about changes in the social and political life. There's also about 700 million Chinese citizens that are daily users of internet services and internet, mainly social media users, and it may be seen as a very important part of changing the whole society, but we used to have such a hopes. About 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, we seen the changes in Arabic words that were called Twitter revolutions, and many people all over the world was very hopeful that the Twitter or other social media would be a huge hope in changes in these countries. But we see right now that those hopes were like empty hopes, and social media and internet and digitalization can be, of course, helpful. This is what we see right now in Ukraine, according to the information war, but it doesn't. It's not obvious that this is the part of democratization or the part of building awareness on human rights or changes in political ways in many societies. So, just as Alicia and Łukasz said, it can be some part of change, but it's really hard to say if it's really a huge change and it's going to be some strong political movement, or rather connected with everyday life issues. It doesn't mean that it's not important, because it's very important. But just as I said, I'm not an expert on China and Chinese society. I'm rather thinking about this issue as an observer of quite similar movements in other parts of the world. So it's always good to have hope, but we see in so many countries that it's very often just some small changes that they need really a long time and huge effort to make a difference.
I know someone has a question in their head. You can do it.
Okay.
Oh.
But I wonder if we can all elaborate a little bit more on different other factors aside of freedom and democracy, which was repeated many times in the movie, like social economic factors, which contributed to the situation in Hong Kong, and especially the disagreement between the younger generation, younger Hong Kongers, on what was going on in Hong Kong. So, to what extent and I will probably agree to that. This, the idea of they taking away the possibility to express yourself and all these democratic. Well, I don't think democracy is a good expression here concerning Hong Kong, but still, all these issues that were part of the autonomy. That was probably the most important thing. But what about socioeconomic issues and factors?
Okay, I'm pretty sure that you know the answer to the question, but thank you for that. True. When I was doing the studies, also among the youth students in Hong Kong before the Umbrella Revolution, before the 2019 protest. Yeah. Okay. I'm pretty sure that you know the answer on the question, but thank you for that. True. When I was doing the studies, also among the youth students in Hong Kong before the Umbrella Revolution, before the 2019 protest, I had an idea that it's about the political freedoms, it's about the democracy, it's about, about the politics, let's say. But that's true. A lot of grievances grievances are rooted due to the specific socio-economic situation in Hong Kong. I know that today, and also in that film, we present a kind of, let's say, very optimistic perspective on the Hong Kong history. But we need to also bear in mind that this is the region with the one of the biggest so-called crony capitalism, so ties between the, let's say, authorities and the big business, business tycoon. This is the region in which you have a huge housing problem. There are those cage homes that you have only a few meters square to live, yes. And I could talk a lot about the low, let's say, mobility, upward mobility among the young people and so on. But in the same time, again, I will stick to my background as a scholar. We know that maybe not every revolution, but to motivate people to take part in the protest, you need grievances, politicized grievances. And Hong Kong is a very good case of that. And for me, for instance, it was not something amazing that we had 2014 protests, because in my studies, I already saw so-called normative justification to protest a few years before that. So I saw that something will happen, yes, because we saw that grievances, and in the same time, on, let's say, not only demand side, but on the supply side, we had this localist movements, the organization. Sylvia mentioned Joshua Wong. Joshua Wong started not only with his known, not only, of course, it was a top, let's say, of his activity, this umbrella movement, but he started with this moral and national education, scholarism, yes. He started, so we had kind of politicization of those grievances among the young people.
Teenager.
Yes, and it was, yeah, he was teenager. Yes, like, let's say 15 years old, yes, to start a political career, this is something amazing, that's true. So a lot of issues starting also with those socio-economic grievances among the youth people. Democracy, the Hong Kong is a very good example of, in Poland we have those sayings about the democracy, socialism and so on, that democracy is needed also to have social policy, to have more, let's say, kind of social protection and so on, something what there was lack in Hong Kong, not only last decades, but also, or even mostly during the British times. Yes, it was only about the business economy. When Heritage Foundation started this, Heritage Foundation, I guess the Freedom Index, yes, business, freedom business, they were always on the top, yes, as the most free society, because low taxes, the policy which is helping the business, but we forgot somehow, yes, about the situation of the young people. So those protests are very tied to the issue, socio-economic issue. I agree totally.
This was the generation that was born after or close to 1990.
Yes, the identity issue is also important because they. Again, I will give the example of my studies that British Hong Kong for those young people was kind of very, let's say, something very optimistic. Although it was not like that. UK did not democratize, let's say, the Hong Kong. Chris Patton, whom you could saw in the movie, was only one and the last governor that started some political reforms in Hong Kong. But for decades, for more than 100 years, there was not some huge changes, political changes. So for me, it was also amazing that those young people, in my interviews, they were saying that, we had, as a Hong Kongers, we had more to say in colonial Hong Kong than later on. Maybe somehow they were right, because there were some commissions, committees that they could, the Hong Kongers could express their views. and that's why they see, and for instance, something what China did not like at all, those British colonial Hong Kong flags during the protests and so on, because it was also tight. Those they were mostly young people. Democratic movement, Democracy Party, which was based in the 90s, was seen by those young people as not very active. So that's why we had this third, let's say, pillar in Hong Kong, not only pro-government, pro-Beijing, not only pro-democratic movement, those new, younger, more active protesters, those localists, so-called localist, nativist organization. I remember when I was doing, sorry, I will, because I'm speaking too much, but I will tell you one anecdote. When I was doing the interviews with some I won't tell you the names, but anyway, with one of the pro-democratic leader, and they call themselves radical Democrats. And I asked, why you call yourself radical Democrats? And they started to talk about, because we sometimes, yes, are arrested by the police and so on. And maybe he noticed, my face, that I was, okay, this is not very radical. This was what I had in my head. And he said, I know that you in Europe, in Poland, you sometimes burn tires during the protests. And for them, it was something amazing. But it was before 2014. Later on, during 2019, you could saw those burning tires on the street also, yes? But those were young people, those localist movement, not this pro-democratic movement, which is, very, they really love freedom, democracy, but I can understand why the young people follow those localists more than those pro-democratic organizations. Sorry for speaking so long.
Just one thing, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I also think that we should maybe problematize. There was this one passage in the movie with, I think it was the lady advisor, I cannot remember her name. She said, she made this comparison between the benevolent, she used the word benevolent colonial rulers. And I think that also in the 60s, the colonial armed forces used violence against the labor movement in Hong Kong, right? And there were protests in Hong Kong in late 60s, and they were cracked down.
It started to build a kind of Hong Kong identity. Those protests in Hong Kong in the 60s. It was very, very important moment for Hong Kong also to build a kind of Hong Kongese, let's say, identity. That's true.
Anyone else? Okay, so last question for me. I just had this. I just had these thoughts when I was listening to you. And don't ever say sorry. You know a lot about Hong Kong. We want to hear it.
There are Hong Kong girls here, so.
So what I was thinking is, how much I think the West wanted to help China kind of liberalize, right? That was kind of the idea. It backfired. But I think we did take a big part, different countries, in what is now the Chinese regime, personally. And I think, personally, that's why I like to take responsibility also for what's going on there, and that's why I personally also do these kind of things and try to help. By helping the regime, by helping with our money, and also I think I'd love to, maybe it's not a conversation for today, but one day I'd like to talk about also how much Hong Kong took part also in, it's a little maybe controversial, right, in building up the regime. And my question did Hong Kong ever have a chance, really? Was there ever a way that it could?
Well, very quickly, the thing you've just said about all of us playing a part in making China what it is now, and in Hong Kong playing its part, I feel that we often have a tendency to look at countries or different entities on the international arena as these unitary states or actors. So there is one position of the government, or which kind of should translate into how we interpret this country or this entity and its choices and behaviors. But I do think that we should talk more about different groups of interest. So obviously you have the business elites, and they would have a very different interest, and they would define their role or their long-term goals in interacting with China in a very different way than people at the grassroots. So I guess it's about being able to voice this different, or like define this interest and make it more transparent for us to understand what they are. And if we can do anything, I'm not sure whether we can, but we still have Taiwan in the picture, and we should make it as costly as possible for China to, you know, consider coercing Taiwan in anything else than the political realm.
Taiwan will be the next huge challenge, and this is something what we need to take care. I was asking the same question myself very often, and I'm sorry, but I have a feeling that no. Unfortunately, take into consideration the situation, these complex relations with China and so on. Whatever could happen to Hong Kong, of course, we could, you know, it could take like 20 years more, let's say, for Hong Kong. But I don't see any solution for Hong Kong, unfortunately. Only one possible path would be changes in the PRC as such. And of course, we believed for many, maybe not many decades, but let's say for the last 20 decades that yes, China can change its political system. We all believed. No one can say now that we always knew what happens. I also had kind of, you know, feeling that yes, the progress, economic progress of China could influence also its politics and liberalization of politics. But we see where we are.
I have a feeling that it's like most of the Western world about this 20 or 30 years ago taken for granted that open market and capitalism in China means also open society and human rights and democratization. Sooner or later, this is going to be this scenario. And well, it wasn't like it couldn't happen. It could happen because, well, it was something that we've seen in our part of the world. That, well, I mean, of course, the solidarity movement wasn't the movement upon human rights only. It was mainly the movement on economical issues. So, if such a situation can happen in Eastern Central Europe, why it couldn't happen in China? Especially that China was always seen as a little bit different than Soviet Union, so why not? So, but we are learning all the time, and geopolitics, it's not mathematics. It's not like that, it's always 2 + 2, it's 4. And societies aren't all, these social organisms aren't like normal biological organisms. We are also changing, and there are so many black swans that can happen all the time, and it's really hard to say. I think that if such a discussion was 3 years ago, we would have a little bit different angles to think about. Before COVID, before Ukraine, so I don't want to say that there is always a hope. Because there is always a hope. But I rather think that the hope can be somehow with us. This is what I was speaking a little bit earlier about. Our biggest weapon is awareness. And it's about, I think, everything. When we are speaking about disinformation, it's not about fighting with disinformation. It's about building awareness and understanding of changes in narratives and in information war all around us. When we are speaking about Ukraine situation, especially somewhere not in Eastern Europe, it's all about awareness in societies. Because the more societies are aware of the situation, the bigger chance is going to be that they are going to understand what is happening, have a stronger influence on their government. And we see the situation. We see how Western societies in February and in March were crucial for Western governments to put on sanctions on Russia. Without societies, there wouldn't be so many sanctions. And same situation right now with Hong Kong or with Taiwan in our part of the world. The more aware we are going to be and understand what is happening and what are the longer influences also on our lives, the bigger chances are going to be that there is going to be some change. Maybe not so easy, not so fast, and not so deep as we want to be, but there is always some kind of hope. If there wouldn't be a hope, so my job wouldn't be needed, I think.
All right, thank you very much. This is the end of the session. We're going to go now downstairs to the bars.
Downstairs.
Sorry, upstairs. Last time we had our meetings upstairs, so we were going downstairs. Now we're downstairs, so we're going to go upstairs. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, it would be nice downstairs under the palace. Yeah, some secret rooms.
Under the palace, secret rooms with secret Hong Kongers. So if we can continue our conversation there. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.